Okay, so I just got back from the iron and I pressed all of my seam allowances open. I got my back seam allowance pressed and I have my side seams pressed. And what I did was I went ahead and I glanced at my instructional packet for what's the next step so I can be ready, and I saw that I need to stay at the ironing board. So if you are just starting this video, you might want to stop and go ahead and press down that 1/4 inch marking from the top, on the very top edge, according to your patterns, that says 1/4 inch fold under. So you're going to want to fold this 1/4 inch top back towards the wrong side. So if you haven't done that so far, you might want to take some time to do that. You can also kind of place things with some pins, and then maybe go to you can fold it down a 1/4 inch, place some pins in place, and then go to the ironing board and kind of press that down even more so. I use the pressing ham. I think that really helped, especially on some of these curved areas around the hips on the side seam. So just make sure that you press this down a 1/4 inch now. I think it'll save you a little bit of a headache later. So after you get this top edge folded down towards the wrong side, you're going to then fold the fabric along the fold mark and match it up with that the bottom markings, because we want to have a 1/2 inch casing here that we can run our elastic through. Now, when I'm going to go ahead and match mine up, I'm going to match it up just below that marking that's at a 1/2 inch, because I need to make sure that my stitching isn't going to interfere with the actual running through of the elastic. So if you need to give yourself a little bit more room, you're going to match up this folded edge just below that marking on the marking along the top. So just to kind of go back to our pattern, what you're going to do is you're going to fold that 1/4 inch down, and then you're going to fold along the fold line here back, and you want to match up this folded top edge after you fold again with just below that front marking that's along the top of our skirt area. So on the back is where you're doing all of your pinning, but you want to make sure that matches up just below those original kind of waistline markings, so that you have space to run that elastic through. It's going to be fairly tight, so we need to make sure that we pay attention to our distance that we're folding down, and make sure that it's consistent all the way around the skirt. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm starting at the center back seam, and I'm going to go ahead and fold that down and match it up just so it's below that original marking. And I'm going to place my pins. I'm going to place my pin in right there along that folded edge and place it so I can grab those out the top. And I'm just going to work my way around, kind of holding that fabric tight and placing it just so that 1/4 inch folded under edge is right below that original marking. And this should match up on the side seams, because the pattern was made to be folded in that direction. So I'm going to make sure that that my side seams, when I get to those side seams, that my seam area matches up vertically. And again, you can place in as many pins as you think is necessary to help you achieve a good stitch line. And as you can see, like my fold down area is very flat, and that's what you want to do. And again, I'm placing those pins right along that fold line, because that's where I'm going to be stitching. We're going to be stitching right along this area of that underturned fold. And if you need to, just to keep things tight on the casing that we're making, put in some extra pins. I think I might go back in, and I'm going to put some along that fold line so I know that that's flat, but then I'm going to come up and I'm actually going to put some pins along that casing, just to make sure everything is held in place. And I'm just going to keep working around the top of this skirt, placing some pins in the casing portion, and then also coming back and making sure that that the area where I'm going to be stitching will be held in place. I'm going to go, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the side seam here, and I'm going to just make sure that that lines up, and then I'm going to kind of work my way backwards because I want to make sure that I want to make sure that my side seams match up just as I want them to, and I'm going to go ahead and put a couple pins in that casing space. And I can see those markings because I transferred those with my tracing paper onto the wrong side of my sample. And if you need to, get out your seam gauge to make sure that you're having a consistent fold down around the top of this skirt area. Okay, things are looking good. I think I need to put in a couple more pins. I err on the on the side of excess pins because I really want things to stay in place. So don't be afraid to be a little overboard with your pins, because taking the time now will really give you a better finished product after we're able to be done stitching here. Alright, and I just have one more kind of section left, the side seam to back to the center back as I go around. Now what I want to do is we're going to be stringing our elastic through this casing that we're just made. So that means that we have to leave an opening. We have to leave an opening along the edge somewhere. I will typically leave a space open at the center back seam, and then I can come back and close that later, and that's what we're going to do. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a pin in the opposite direction, and I'm going to put two back to back so that I know when I start stitching around that I need to stop there so that I don't forget and accidentally close it, and then I'll have to seam rip it open a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I have to fold my fabric so I'm only stitching one layer at a time. And I'm going to line up, I'm going to be stitching along the very bottom edge of this folded under section that we just pinned into place. Alright, so I'm going to start at my first pin here. Go ahead and make sure that's flat. I'm going to go ahead and start kind of right at that center back seam. I'm going to work my way around going forward, and I'll come back and I'll stop right along the edge of that once I hit that pressed open seam allowance. So you're going to want to make sure that you are only stitching through one layer, and you're going to want to double check as you go. But again, we're going to be stitching right along this folded edge, like within 1/16 of an inch. So it's going to be very close. It's going to be very kind of important that we go slow as we go around this corner, or just around this whole waistband area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my fabric under my presser foot, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball where is that needle going to go into the fabric, and I want it right along the edge, like within 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to move my fabric over, lifting up my presser foot as I need to really position that fabric where I want it to, and then when I get to that edge that's right along that folded edge, I'm going to put that needle down and lower my presser foot so I have a place to start. Now I'm going to start this stitch line with doing some back stitching just to make sure that everything is held in place. Now I'm just going to I'm going slow so that I can really go right along that folded under edge. We want to make sure that we go along that edge, because not only are we connecting our casing into place, but we're also grabbing that 1/4 inch folded under area. Now, so what I'm doing is, as I stop and I lift up my pins, I'm making sure that I am only stitching through one layer, so I'm kind of moving my under fabric out of the way. And so we're just going to keep stitching around this outer edge. Again, go slow. You don't want to be too speedy about this process, because this stitches, these stitches, like this row of stitches and the next one that we do, are very important that we don't close that casing up too small and we can't get our elastic to run through. But just so you know, like there's always ways to solve problems. For if you do get a little bit small, a little bit smaller, you can always go and purchase a more narrow width of elastic to string through here. But we're going to try to keep things at using that 1/2 inch elastic, because that's what I've purchased for the class. But you know, if you find that your sample is a little bit more, your casing is a little bit more narrow than what you had originally planned, that's a way to kind of troubleshoot some stitching errors that may come your way. And that's, you know, I know I've said this multiple times, but that's a big portion of what you'll do when you're constructing, especially as you advance on to some of your upper level design courses. You know, you're going to be the ones that make these patterns, so you're the ones that are making these design decisions. And sometimes your design decisions don't go according to plan, but you're on a timeline and you need to get stuff done. So it's, you know, what can you do? What can you do to solve those problems to continue moving forward? So again, I'm stitching like right along that edge as close as I can to grab all the layers of fabric that I need to. Now, since we're going through 3 layers of fabric here, if you find that your needle is struggling to puncture through all of them, you might need to put in a new needle. So if you need to, go ahead and replace that. If you have some questions about how to replace that needle, you know, I think there's a section for that in your construction packet. But again, if you want some help with that, just let me know and I'll try to guide you as best that I can. Now again, I'm kind of getting to that side seam, and I want to make sure that my seam lines are matched up. So mine kind of shifted a little bit, I think, in the stitch process. So I just adjusted that and kind of pulled it as I was stitching to make sure that things would line up as I want them to. I'm just going around. I hit that second side seam, and I'm nearing the center back again. And again, what you're going to want to do is with this left hand, I can feel the opposite edge, and I'm keeping it away from my presser foot and from my stitching. So you know, if you want to look under, make sure that it's clear. But I can feel that double thickness with my left hand here to make sure that it's clearly out of the way. Okay, and I'm nearing that center back area. I can see my double pins approaching. Now when I hit that double pin, I'm going to do some back stitching and finish that off. And what I've done is that I've left open about a 1/2 inch of an area to go ahead and string my elastic through. So what I want to do is I want to take my elastic and make sure that I'm going to be able to clear that. It's going to be pretty tight, but I think it's going to work. So what you want to do next is go ahead and trim all your thread tails up, and you're going to string this elastic through this casing. Now I have some safety pins in class that you can use. Just please return them, because you know, of other classes and in the future you'll want to make sure that I just want to have the supplies that I need for other classes. And so what you're going to want to do now is to measure. Oh, I don't think I brought my measuring tape. You're going to want to take your soft measuring tape, and I would start at center back and measure all the way around the circumference of your waistline opening, because that is going to determine how long you cut this your elastic piece. So what you're going to want to do is take that soft tape measure that you have and measure all the way around, and there's a spot in your construction packet that says write down the waist circumference here. I'm not going to do that because I want you to try to do it on your own and to identify that marking. But then what you're going to do is you're going to measure and then cut that. You're going to measure it, and then you're going to identify that distance on your elastic, and then subtract 1.5 inches from that measured circumference, and then cut the elastic to that waist. So you know, if you need some help in class with using that soft tape measure that has the inch markings on it, let me know. But what you're going to do to string that casing after you get it going is you're going to want to attach a safety pin to the end of your elastic, and I attach mine about 1/4 inch in. And then whichever way that you think feels more natural, you're going to put that safety pin in and gently work it around into this casing, like kind of pushing it forward and pulling it as you can. And it might be a little tricky to get it started just because the elastic edges might want to catch on your casing opening. But once you get it started, it's not too difficult to pull through, but it's going to be fairly tight. So just know that going in, and as you go around, you're going to want to make sure that you keep that elastic as flat as you can. And wherever there's a seam allowance, you might run into some issues because you need to kind of wiggle that safety pin head around so that you can get through that opening. And it might be a little bit trickier than you want it to be, but if you kind of like pinch it down to kind of open up that hole that it was formed by both of your seam allowances, you can usually get it through. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera and continue this around the edge, and then what we'll do is we'll finish up with how to attach your elastic at the end and closing up this back seam. So again, I'm going to go off camera. To do this, you're going to want to continue feeding that elastic through the casing all the way around. All right.